Welcome to High Return Hospitality. Operational excellence meets emotional connection. This webinar is brought to you by Agilicis. I have a few housekeeping notes before we get started. The audio for this webinar will come from your computer, laptop, or mobile device. Please make sure the speakers are on and turn up the volume. You can pose questions for our webinar panelists at any point during this presentation by using the Q&A function that you'll see to the left of your screen. And finally, at the conclusion of this webinar, roughly around 3 p.m. Eastern, this live stream will soon become available streaming on demand. And so you can share it with colleagues who need to see it. You can enjoy it all over again or take more detailed notes. We're happy to provide that service. I'm Robert Firpo Cappiello, Editor-in-Chief at Hospitality Technology, and I am so psyched to present High Return Hospitality, Operational Excellence Meets Emotional Connection, brought to you by Agilicis. I'm going to introduce our fantastic panel, and we've got a really engaging presentation coming up. Carrie Holmes is Chief Information Officer at Kalahari Resorts and Conventions. Steve Curtin is a best-selling author and keynote speaker and a Marriott veteran. Terry O'Hanlon is Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Agilicis. Welcome to the webinar. Steve, Carrie, and Terry. I'm gonna slip backstage and enjoy this next portion of the webinar with this team. I'll be back in a little bit for Q&A and some closing thoughts. Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Robert. I will kick us off with this overview, this roadmap of where we're headed. We'll distinguish, first of all, we'll make this distinction between a well-run and a well-loved business. Next, we will examine the performance sweet spot. We will then differentiate between transactional efficiency and emotional connection. And then we'll discuss the integration and deployment of technology as it relates to the intersection of the art of service with the power of data, establishing the right technology foundation, and acting on change. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, and let's just jump right in. All right, so we'll begin by making a distinction here between a well-run and a well-loved business. So a well-run business is one that displays operational excellence. In this type of business, you can expect cleanliness, organization, and competent staff. The result is often transactional efficiency. Now, a well-loved business is one that makes an emotional connection with the customer. And in this type of business, employees have the information they need to offer personalized customer service, recall preferences, anticipate customers' needs, and exceed expectations. So well-run businesses are characterized as being efficient, transactional, and process-focused, whereas well-loved businesses are characterized as being personalized, relational, and customer-focused. So in light of these definitions, we've got a couple of quick polling questions. And here they are. The first one is, and it will be appearing soon for you to respond to, but the first one is name a trait of a well-run company. And so as you think about a well-run company, think about when a company is well-run, what do you notice? What stands out in terms of its operations, in terms of its facilities, in terms of its reputation? Take about 30 seconds or so as this question appears to respond to it, and then we'll take a look collectively at the responses as they come in. Okay, so we're going to end the survey, and let me just point out I suppose what I'm seeing is they're strategic. Well-run companies are organized. They are process-driven. These are the things we think of when we're thinking about a well-run company. So now we want to transition to the next polling question, which is naming a trait of a well-loved company. So when you think about a well-loved company, what do you notice? What stands out about the culture of a well-loved company? What about employee behaviors in a well-loved company? What about customer behaviors in a well-loved company? Again, this question, there's a slight delay, but it will be appearing soon. And if you would, just type your responses to a trait of a well-loved company. All right, so we'll end this survey. And so what I'm seeing is that a well-loved company is a company that that can charge more. They attract more customers. They attract more and retain more employees. Both customers and employees are more engaged. And something I would add is they often have a compelling mission, a vision, or purpose. All right, so we're clear on the difference between well-run companies and well-loved companies. And what you'll notice is that it's not zero sum, well-run or well-loved. It's really both. And so with that, we'll advance to the performance sweet spot. So here's the performance sweet spot, where you see the intersection of these three circles, where you see that bright yellow star. That is where engaged employees and loyal customers reside. And so what we're going to examine with these three circles is the total job role. And I'll tell you, in my line of work, every conversation that I have that concerns customer service quality or customer experience quality starts with a discussion of the performance sweet spot. So let me define it. Every job role consists of two dimensions, and you see them on the left: job functions and job essence. Job functions are the duties and tasks that are associated with a job role, and job essence is the highest priority of the job role. It's the purpose of the job role. And every job role consists of three parts, and you see them here: the job knowledge, job skills, and job purpose. So job knowledge is knowing what to do, job skills is knowing how to do it, and job purpose is knowing why the work is being done, the purpose behind one's work. Now, most organizations equip employees with job knowledge and job skills with the goal of competency. This is typical of well-run businesses. They're known for transactional efficiency. But now, exceptional organizations don't settle for developing competent employees or delivering transactional service quality or creating satisfied customers. Instead, they aspire to not only develop competent employees, but to develop competent employees who are engaged by virtue of being connected to the higher purpose of their job role, which might be to surprise and delight customers, or it might be to create a promoter or a brand champion. It might be to instill confidence or make a lasting positive impression. These are well-loved companies known for making an emotional connection with their customers. So let's differentiate now between transactional efficiency and emotional connection. Okay, for instance, a front desk agent can efficiently check in a hotel guest. She can confirm registration details. She can acquire a valid method of payment. She can issue a room key. She can provide relevant information such as hours of operation. She can do all these things and execute transactional efficiency, which is a trait, as we've discussed, of well-run operations. While at the same time, she can smile. She can make eye contact. She can add enthusiasm to her voice. She can use a guest's name. She can recall preferences. She can anticipate needs, take initiative. She can be observant, establishing an emotional connection with the guest, which is a trait of a well-loved organization. So by expressing genuine interest in the guest, the front desk agent is, in addition to establishing an emotional connection, she's reflecting the higher purpose of her job role, which might be to create a promoter or to delight the guest. And so here's the deal. If you check into most hotels, regardless of tier or brand, you can count on the bulleted list on the left, transactional efficiency. But in many hospitality environments, whether or not you experience the bulleted list on the right, emotional connection hinges on the employee you happen to encounter. And it may be a mistake to rely on happenstance. Right, Terry?
That is such a great point, Steve, and I've advanced too far. There we go. The happenstance part of it happens often because employees aren't equipped with the right information to really provide that personalized service. And at its essence, it comes down to the ability to leverage technology and data to arm your service-oriented people with data that helps them deliver the right kind of personalized experience to the right guest. And Carrie, I'm wondering if in your experience, you could offer to the audience how they find those moments, like how they identify transactional behaviors that are sort of low-hanging fruit for being equipped to become a emotional plus transactional experience.
Yeah, I think, I'll speak again from the technology side. You'll hear me say that quite a bit as we go forward. But, really the empowerment for the right side is ensuring that we provide the right information to the front desk, to those that are engaging with the guest, to make sure that they know. You talked about the last name and the preferences and, just even getting the reservation right. And so a lot of that pinning of I call it the handshake there that you showed on that slide is ensuring that we get that accurate from the get-go and then basically rely on that information as we go. And so data becomes the underpinning of what you mentioned as personalization. It really becomes the talking point and the help point for someone to be comfortable enough to engage with the guest. And so having the right information, sometimes we get that from the guest innately. Sometimes, you'll see a website where you're signing in and you're getting your reservation ready to go and you're booking that reservation. And sometimes it's, asking what your interests are, maybe things that you're also booking, services you may be booking. And so you start to build sort of this idea of what the guest is interested in. And over time, that history becomes a good footprint for somebody to understand that guest and engage and feel comfortable engaging. So data is so critical, to it. And also, I want to be very cognizant. We hear a lot about security and, there's certainly things that we want to be very sensitive about, and make sure if the guest doesn't want to share, we don't want to have that. We do the right things with it at the same time. So, there's that side of the house. But certainly, we want to empower. I think that's the key, right? Use the right information, the right insight about our guests to empower people to feel comfortable to have the conversations, even the picture you're showing there, right? To be able to speak and feel comfortable. And I think that's what makes, I know even from us, makes it such a neat experience, is being able to call it the full service experience of really being able to engage with the guest. And again, well run, well loved, that theme there that you're talking about. So I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, great. I love what you're saying about, being sort of observational about not only understanding what data you already have, but then observing how your team can best put that data to work in the interactions that they have with guests. But I'm wondering also if you could share with people, it all sounds nice, but, technology is an interesting friend and foe often. And I'm wondering if maybe you can give the audience a little bit of guidance on, once you decide we want to equip our team with more data and different technology that brings our well-run company to a well-run plus well-loved company, where do they start? How do they prioritize?
Yeah, I'm famous for saying, get the house in order, right? And when it comes to technology, partners like Agilicis, who, and making sure you have the right stack and, right technology systems to be able to run the environment. And I think, knowing that works well, we talked about, you just mentioned before, the processes, right? A lot of the tech stack is what drives those processes, booking a reservation, having the reservation. And so again, I'll call it get the house in order and make sure it works and make sure its processes right, because that takes a lot of the complexity, and I'll call it the friction, out of the engagement that you want to have. And so if we're making sure the staff's well, with the right equipment, devices, and that helps, that engagement go well. So IT, I'll say that word, technologists, we have to make sure that we're doing the right things, picking the right tools, working with the right partners like Agilicis, making sure that we have, and there's multiple out there, but, certainly making sure that we're, having those tools work. But I always say it's important to have things working. And then when there's issues, address it, right? Making sure you're on it and you're trying to tackle it and get that, again, that friction point. And so you have this seamless experience going on for the guest, so that, again, they can just enjoy the vacation, which we all want, and make sure that, there's full service there all around, right?
Yeah, one more thing maybe you can elaborate on that I've heard you talk about before is, as you're looking at different technologies, think about your brand and being brand consistent with the interactions that you enable digitally and the ones that you keep, one-to-one. So maybe give a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, certainly, we've heard this word, digital transformation, digital journey. And when you talk about that personalization, it certainly involves probably different technology pieces than you've seen way in the past, right? And so you've got the mobile app, you've got the website, you've got the check-in, the kiosk, tablets, pay at the table. You're seeing a lot of different technology pieces, right? And so back to this, getting the house right, all of those things have to work in tandem and together. And so as a brand, you have to decide, what of those things do we want? What things do we want to enable and not, and what works and what doesn't. So, that is a conscious decision I think all organizations have to go through and think through as you move forward, and which ones that you want to enable. And again, what makes the right decision, right choice for the brand that you have and the company that you're servicing.
Yeah, really good points, because as you say, there are so many options out there, and you can, jump in with both feet and have a sort of quilt that doesn't match the impressions you're trying to make. So thanks for making that point. It's a good transition to talk about what drives technology change. There's all kinds of research that tells us most people don't like change, and there's staff in an organization who may be uncomfortable with change. And I know you'll address how to get them more comfortable with it. But I'm wondering if you can share, based on your career and observations, what are the key things that sort of lay down the gauntlet and help organizations understand it's time to change and we need to take a step forward?
Well, I can start with one easy one, then you have it on the slide there. Sometimes change is enacted upon us, not necessarily something that we want to deal with, and COVID obviously is one of those examples where, everybody had to take a step back and really look at how we were going to handle that. And of course, we all know that was sort of separation, right? More distance, more space, right? And so we had to go through, the plexiglass and putting up things that would help us. But we still had to remember we're still hospitality and people still want to come on vacation. And so that was one right out of the gate. I can say just without a doubt, sometimes those get thrown at you and you have to adjust. And so you saw a lot more of the kiosk usage, right? The self-service. There were a lot of trends in mobile. And I think in places where you wouldn't have expected it, maybe you thought maybe with that brand, like the branding, would have taken a little longer. But I think ultimately, it had to be a decision point to continue to operate in some cases, but in others, it was just a choice to go and help the situation along. And there again is a good example of where the driver of the technology change there was something out of our control. But a lot of times, it can come from innovation. The word AI is out there, right? Innovators, innovation, things that you hear. It can also just come from, I will say, quite handily, you can just innately out of, people working throughout the company or the organization, just ideas. And again, process is another one where you'll see, can we make it simplified? Can we make it more efficient? Can we make it better? There's a lot of enablers, strategies that the organizations trying to do that, then you look at the tech and you say, this might be a good place to maybe pivot or to try something new or to find another partner or find something that works. But ultimately, I think the key is to keep your ears and eyes open. I always say, you never know what's around the corner, but you should be prepared. And again, we have to mark that change always with how it can be consumed. We have to make sure people are ready. We have to engage. We have to make sure that the guest is ready. And certainly we never want to make it where it's a deterrent and it's almost like moving the other way in a negative way from a tech perspective, because that's always a bad place to be. So it has to be flexible. It has to be an enabler, and it has to support what the business is trying to do long term. And that's why when you looked at COVID, certainly mobile apps, kiosks, now they're still around, they're still being used, and they're still helping in many ways. And I'll even throw out there, which we all know, we hear the labor, tough to find labor over that COVID period, it was, tough. And so again, you had to find ways to keep working, but again, using technology to help drive that movement. And I would definitely say it was quite the learning experience. And I think, we've got a lot of good things that came out of it. But I will go back to one other thing we talked about just before as well, the digital transformation. That in itself for years now has been pushing folks to relook at, how are we going to check in? How are we going to check out? How are we going to, because there is, I'll call it the speed to service. Sometimes you have that a little bit in some things that, you'd like to have. So I think there's just a lot of enablers, again, keeping your ears to, what's happening, what can help, what can service more, what can make that guest experience better, and really just keeping your finger on the pulse, if they will, to, if you will, to what's happening.
Now, those are excellent points. I'm wondering, in your experience, is the impetus for change, does it often come from bottom up, where people are saying, I just can't get my job done, or I don't have the freedom to meet the customers where they are, and they're coming to the organization and saying, make this better? Or is it more, business driven, increase in revenue, decrease in cost, or IT driven, where the IT organization has its finger on the pulse of what's possible and brings that vision to the rest of the company. Do you have a thought about that, or is it all over the place?
It is all over the place. I think of it almost as a circle, right? And you have these arrows kind of pointing in and pushing in sort of this need for something new, something different, something better. And that's, again, I think it's a service provider mentality of IT technology teams to really be listening and really be a partner. I'll say this again, partner with the operations team and really, trying to understand, to listen, to learn, and to help, where we can. But a lot of times, you really, it can come from any of those places. And I think that's what makes it exciting. And I think that's why, we have seen a lot of the changes we have, because it is innately helpful. Virtual lines. I mean, you can go through the gamut of, again, mobile devices and just what they're helping to do now. All these things that you just, go back 15, 20, 30, you didn't have a lot of these things. So it's exciting. And I think that is really what, especially in hospitality, when you mold those two together, really comes out on the other side of being just a great place to be.
Yeah, I agree. It is a great time to be in hospitality now, because the industry is adopting many of the conveniences that, the staff experience in their personal life or interact with in other industries. So it's nice to be able to drive that, those advancements. We're going to take a little bit of a poll here now with our audience. And the polling question is, you heard Carrie talk about a variety of impetuses for change. So we have a number of elements here, and I'd like people to check all that apply in your own adoption of technology change. And we'll just give people a little bit of time here to pick that out. As you're thinking about it, there's so many places to consider and so many technologies that can impact an organization. I do think prioritization is one of the big skills that the IT organization needs.
It is key. Yes, absolutely. Priority and what comes first, second, third, year over year. Laying out those plans, looking at it, multi-year, multi-year, absolutely. Yep. And making sure that and again, things will fall in. We'll talk about the COVID one again, things will come in you will least expect, and then you have to readjust those plans and continue to figure out how you keep that, top of mind, things that you want to work on, certainly. And I'll even talk about a little bit about pilots, right? You have this ability to pilot things sometimes. It means maybe you're just going to test the toe in the water kind of mentality, right? Just see if it's the right fit, the right thing. And I think that's a neat way to sort of look at driving tech a little bit, but just kind of seeing if that's the right fit. Does it work right? Test the waters. Again, I think there's ways that you can sort of put those things in as well that help you decide, make that right choice, see it, put your hands on it, especially when it comes to our operations team, to be able to actually see what it's going to be like. And maybe even in some cases, a consumer research group or something with guests that you might want to even go that far to test it with the guest side. So I think there's a step there that you can take without having to go full into technology that you might not be so certain of out of the gate.
I love that observation, especially in an industry that's so grounded in service. It seems like an empathetic way to go, to do a little bit of piloting and crawl, walk, run. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the survey and send the results to the audience. So it's interesting. We're now going to ask you so you've checked all that apply, and it's, it's a pretty wide range of impetuses for change. Now I'm going to ask people to choose their top three, because as we expected, it's pretty much across the board. Yes, all of these things are, swirling about in our decision making, but we're wondering if you could prioritize for us the top 3 right now, and I mean over the next 12-month period. I know, Carrie, you were talking about the challenges of prioritizing, and I do like something that you mentioned about, sometimes you have data about what people want, surveys and such, but you had a comment about being observational about the way guests and staff are using the technology that's in place right now, and I'm wondering if you can just share some thoughts on that while we wait for people to select.
Yeah, it's key to, even with technology you may have had for a long time, it's important to continue to observe, to perhaps sometimes in surveys even ask how certain technology experiences were as you were checking out or doing things. But it's always important to continue to watch how it works. Maybe what you put in place, years ago isn't working as effectively as it could now, or maybe, just doesn't have the right functionalities, going forward that you're looking for. And so I think, making sure you go back to listening, observing, asking, watching, it's an important part of especially hospitality, where you get to see it day in, day in and out. How it's working, and you always get a chuckle on it. I don't know if this happens to you, Terry, but you'll get in front of the register to check out, and the register will go down, and I always have this funny look on my face, and they kind of look, and I'm like, I understand, and, empathize, what's happening, and I always think about that poor team that's trying to make it come back up, but it happens, and I'll go back to that, how it's foundation, but you have to be able to continue to monitor. I'd always call it, don't set it and forget it. Don't set it and forget it, right? Just make sure you're paying attention and make sure it's still working for the organization and the guest. Again, I'll go back to the guest experience, because, what might have worked before maybe needs a tweak, maybe needs an adjustment. And a lot of times, the ones that are in it the most or experiencing it the most are the ones that'll give you that feedback. So, and it's helpful to keep the finger on the pulse of what's happening and what needs to maybe change.
Yep. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the survey, but what your comment is well aligned with the top 2 drivers: increasing guest spend while on property and increasing the guest rebookings, which both go to well loved. I mean, when you really love a place, you're going to stay on property, experience more across that property, and you want to go back. It's a place that you feel like you're at home. So that's interesting and well aligned with the points you've been making. So I'm going to move now to enacting change. So it's great to have our prioritization and our game plan for what we're trying to accomplish when we do change. But again, it's not always the easiest thing to accomplish. You've talked already about the considering contained pilots and, working with a technology partner. But I'm wondering if you could touch on, the ability when you're enacting change and tying back to Steve's point about purpose. Can we use this enacting change initiative in order to consider new ways to measure success across our properties? Traditionally, we've used RevPAR and, room average daily rates and everything. But it strikes me, especially given the responses to the survey, that, maybe we have an opportunity to consider revenue per guest and having the right technology to interact with people in a number of different ways to see what a true lifetime value is or on property value is. And I wonder if you could have some observations along that line.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at technology, right, you're always driving to what value it's going to provide. And so back to the job and the job role, is it going to be making them more efficient? Is it going to be helping to your point, drive revenue? Is it going to be helping to sell something more, upsell, whatever it might be, right? But there's usually a purpose, to why we use the particular technology. I always joke with, I've said this to you before about you go home and you're on your phone and you do things, but then sometimes you go to work, you're like, I don't know how to use this, right? And you always feel like, oh, this is weird. You always remind people to try and do some analogies to help to maybe enact that change and remind folks this is similar to this, but a little different from this. But yeah, I think again, change is just trying to show that there's going to be a better end result, and then tying that end result to how it helps their job or helps the company or the organization. But again, tethering that all the way through, right? And making them feel like it's helping and not hindering. Because again, the hindering and not enabling is what we want tech to do. So we want it to be of value and of service itself, just to the guest and the operations team. So yeah, technology changes. They're not always easy. And also, I will say, we all know this. We experience this with our phones. You upgrade to the new version and you're like, darn it, it broke something, or there's another, bug that I wasn't, and you hear it on the TV and you're like, that's me. That's the version I have, right? And so it happens. And, as technologists, we don't want them to happen. We do the best we can to partner up and make sure. But we have to look for those pain points. We have to address them. We have to acknowledge them. We have to make sure we have a plan for them. And again, the listening and trying to evolve and move forward. And so a crawl, walk, run way, I'll go back to this pilot, is to cut it up, roll something out in pieces so that it can be consumed more easily. You always hear the elephant, eating in pieces kind of thing. I always chuck when I hear that. But, take it in pieces, take it in parts. Try to roll it out in a smaller way that then, again, you can sort of get familiar, more comfortable with it. That sometimes eases the pain points. But, there's external environments. We all know when our Wi-Fi goes home it goes home and you're not able to get on the computer, you needed to book something, do something. We all know the external factors are there. Go back to the COVID again. There's always external factors, but you hope that the change that we're enabling, again, is for the benefit of everyone, all part, guests to operations to all of the areas that we have.
No, yeah, those are really good points. And what I hear throughout your comments is really, it's very important for the drivers of change within IT to be really good communicators and to be able to create alignment. And I imagine that's probably been an increasing requirement of your discipline as the pace of change accelerates. So I'm wondering, as a last thought here before I turn it back over to Steve, I'm wondering if you have some tips on that, like how, we all find consistent communication difficult in organizations. And I'm wondering if you've got, some, secret sauce that you use.
Yeah, I think, the always over communicating is always better than under communicating. I think that's what we always find, right? And so constant communication, finding methods to communicate, because, some consume it one way, maybe by a text, and I'll go back to, again, when you look at that guest, it's the same thing, thinking about how you want to communicate, how they want to be communicated to, what is, helpful information, where can they go if they need more information. And it's no different, I think, internally than when you look externally. And there's a lot of communication tools now, right? And, you don't want to over message, you don't want to under message, you want to make sure it's the right message and in the right form. And that has to be, I'll go back to a strategy, has to be sort of played out in how you're going to do that. So both from the enabling change, rolling out technology, all the way through to the guest experience, you want to make sure you're leveraging it the right way. And again, because if we put the right information out there, the experience ultimately is going to benefit. because I'm not worried about what my next appointment, my reservation is for the restaurant. I'm not going to worry about my spot. Like, it's just sort of going to enable it. My itinerary is sort of set up and I know what's happening. And again, sometimes cancellations may happen and you're like, okay, I can bounce. I can do what I need to do. And here's what I need to do. And just all of that. But communication is key, a key thread, I think, in thinking about all of what we talked about and how you stay engaged with everyone that's impacted or, again, affected by the change or in a good or a positive way, right?
Right.
Yeah, communication's key.
Yep. Okay. Well, great. Well, Steve, I'm going to turn this back over to you because you've got a couple of application questions that you had mentioned would be interesting to toss to the audience. So take it away.
You bet. Thank you, Terry and Carrie. And yes, sort of where the rubber meets the road toward the end of this presentation is thinking about, okay, how can I apply this in my real world of work? So it's always nice to have a takeaway. And one way you can do that is to find something transactional and add a personal or an emotional element. So here's the question. Think about a current process in your organization that reflects transactional efficiency. Earlier, we described that as a trait of a well-run business. And then thinking about that process, how can you enhance the process by creating an emotional connection, which is a trait, as we discussed, of a well-loved business. So it's finding a process and looking at opportunities to shape that, to augment that, to supplement that, to enhance it in some way, that it's not just a predictable state and routine process, but it's one that resonates with the guest, captures their imagination, and in reference to the polling questions, may also capture some revenue. So think about this. It's rhetorical in the sense that we're just assigning this as homework for now, because what we'd like to do is get to the final slide, summarize, and open it up for questions while we still have time. So let me ask Robert, how are we looking time-wise for Q&A?
Steve, we've got some good questions coming in, and we've got I think plenty of time to pose some questions to you guys.
All right, well, that sounds good. We've summarized what was discussed to this point in the webinar on this summary slide. So maybe this will help inform some of the questions that you put together. And then as those questions come in, we'll just pose those to whatever panelist you point out, or we can just share in the answering of the questions.
Sure, that sounds good. So one in particular, I think, is it would be great to start with Carrie, with your experience as a hotel operator. One of the attendees asked, it's a great question. Are there some technology transformations that properties can expect to be more challenging than others? So we addressed digital transformation, but I think this is a great question. And Carrie, you're the best place to start. Which of those transformations can potentially be most challenging?
I think the biggest key for the challenge with digital transformation is thinking about all your channels and how the guest, sort of the journey of the guest, goes through all of those channels. So think of it as a puzzle piece. Each of your, again, depending on how many systems you have, right? How does that journey flow through, and how do they come out? Again, seamless, frictionless, sort of with that best guest experience that we can have. And I even see one of the questions was about sort of this topic of, worked here, but then it didn't work here. And this just seems like it just crisscrossed everything that, was trying to be done. And so again, I'll go back to think of it holistically, think of all the pieces and the parts that you have and sort of put those together and think of it, again, from that guest journey perspective, because, and there may be many, I'll call them use cases, but there may be many types of journeys that each of the guests takes, depending on, do they eat in the restaurants? Do they have a spa? Do they, go to, the water park, different things in our world. And so you have to think through all of that. But again, It has to work well all together. And as soon as I go back to that slide we talked about before, as soon as you hit that pain point, that one that sort of, ooh, this doesn't fit right, step back, think, how can it work better? Engage your, a lot of times we work with vendors, engage your vendor partners like an Agilysys and this, and say, hey, we've got this one point here. It doesn't seem to fit, doesn't seem to work. Because again, we don't want the technology to look like it's out of place, but we also don't want it to not fit. We'll go back to the brand again, right? We want it to work and feel seamless. So I think that's how I think about the complexity. It's just always there. And hospitality is pretty known for having multiple pieces and parts. It's just sort of you've got a lot under the roof, if you will, or, underneath that resort in our case. And so you have to think through all those pieces. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. And I found myself taking notes while you were all talking, partly as a professional, as a journalist who covers this, but partly as a traveler and thinking about, I expect or at least hope for the transactional excellence, right? But sometimes I don't even hope for that emotional connection. So when it happens, it's, the cliche is surprise and delight, but literally, when they go that extra mile, offer something, it makes such a difference. Now, Steve, I think the question that Carrie just answered, I think from your point of view, we'd also love to hear your answer, in your role consulting and advising hotels where customer service is concerned. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'd like to be more original, but I'm going to really hop on what I heard Carrie say in her discussion with Terry about friction. Here we're trying to enable self-service opportunities which resonate with customers. We're trying to enable contactless check-ins and contactless service, and yet we don't always do that. One of the comments that came in from one of the listeners was that, I booked a room on an app, I paid for the room on an app, but I have to stand in line to pay $10 for parking. So it's adding friction to what should be a frictionless experience. And you really need to look at those pain points. You really need to look at that friction. You need to ask your question. And this is like from a consulting standpoint, if I'm advising a hotelier, for those that have license over their medallion surveys or their on-property OSAT surveys, to ask questions about customer effort. A lot of times those questions are an afterthought, but to ask a question about how difficult was it for you to use this technology on a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 7 scale, with 1 being easy and a higher number being more difficult, adding those numbers up, doing the division, and tracking the customer effort score with respect to using that technology, that's going to give you a lot of insight. It's going to point out some pain points, and it's going to enable you to assuage some of those friction points that are turning customers off.
Hey, Steve, I was observing that same question, and Carrie, I think we should put you on the spot here, because the back half of that question is, why is there still so much friction? Answer us, Carrie.
A lot of moving parts. I can tell you that, it takes, there's a lot behind the scenes, but also, what Steve was saying, there's a lot on the front side, and it all has to work beautifully. It's like an orchestra has to just magically sort of make that good music. And, you really strive for that. I think, you talked about the brands and, you're striving for that. You want that to all work. You want that experience, because again, you want them walking away going, wow, that was great. And, I really had a great experience. I want to definitely come back and again, just tell others about that. And I think, that's why it is so complex and why it takes a little bit to work through it. But I will say this again, COVID was a rush. In some cases, there were many companies who had to rush through those decisions and got a little bit of time after to get some breathing room to get it right. But, myself, I experienced some of that with, places I visited or where I went over those times. And, it's changed and morphed, and they've learned. But, you just hope you can take it more to I'll call it the crawl, walk, run we talked about, right? You try to do it in a way that makes sense. But I will say, you're all hearing the AI term. It's out there, right? And how that works. And so we may go through that a little bit more as companies sort of decide where they're going with that. And I'm sure there'll be the next and the next thing too. But there's always something. And I think it's just a matter of what you can consume. And again, I'll go back to that change, what you can take on and how fast that can go. That ultimately makes the difference.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I'll just tag on to something that Steve mentioned about the surveys. I've been to places where there have been a couple of mildly disappointing experiences, but it's not something I would complain about. But then in the survey on the back end, it's, where did we fall short? It doesn't even have to be what made you mad or what was too hard. And I think this having to stand in line to pay for parking when the whole rest of the experience was digital, it's nice to share that with the property because they are likely to say, you're absolutely right. And we can take care of that relatively easily. So asking the right questions and having the right observational skills to notice that, those little disconnected areas, I think is going to be the key to getting this right from the consumer experience.
And that inconsistency is perhaps a bigger deal than we think it is, that a holistic environment, an integrated environment so that they have those choices at every turn is maybe more important than we even realize. The paying for parking is a great example. I have one more attendee question. It's probably a relatively quick answer before you do your closing statements, if you don't mind, Steve. It's they're posing it to you earlier. You were talking about job roles and understanding what your job role is and what some very transactional expectations there. But then you spoke about job purpose and understanding it, and we did have an attendee say they'd like to hear a little more about that because sometimes that understanding of purpose is tricky.
Right. Yeah. And most, I'll tell you, most managers, most supervisors, most leaders who I have this conversation with are, they're very aware of job functions. They're very aware of the need for frontline employees to possess adequate job knowledge, to demonstrate sufficient job skills, and as a result, to be competent, because they know that their customers want to interact with employees who are competent, and I don't blame them. But when you approach on job essence and you start having conversations about the higher purpose of the job role, managers, supervisors, leaders are often on different pages with respect to what the highest priority of this job role is. And if you were to ask the frontline employee who takes cues from their supervisor, the manager, the leader, what the highest priority at work is, you're going to get a variety of different answers. And sometimes I'll do this. I'll sequester 5 people and I'll ask them individually, tell me what your job functions are. And 80% of those lists line up. But then I'll ask them individually, what's your highest purpose at work? And 80% of those lists will differ. So they're just literally not on the same page with respect to the higher purpose of their job role. And to speak more specifically to your question, it is asking that question, asking why over and over again. What you want to get from is delivery and execution. In other words, if you were to ask a housekeeper, what is it that you do? What's your highest priority? Most would say to provide a clean guest room. And they're not wrong, because we talked about the importance of being able to provide operationally, a well-run business. But is it really their highest priority? So what I like to do is just ask why, to dig from delivery and execution, which is like a bullet point on a job description, to the true meaning and purpose of the job role, which might be to create a promoter or a loyal guest of the hotel. And that a promoter is somebody who Bain & Company would define as someone who's responsible for 80 to 90% of the positive word of mouth about a company or about a brand. They have higher repurchase rates, and they are less price sensitive. So these are exactly the customers that you want. And if that housekeeper knows that that is their single highest priority, is to create a promoter, how will he or she behave differently in executing the job duties that they're responsible for in the guest room? And that's a rhetorical question for now, but they're going to behave differently. They're going to track promoters, and then occupancies and average rate and RevPAR, everything's going to grow at that hotel.
I love it. It gives us all something to think about in whatever role we are in this industry. I love it. Yeah, you mentioned you wanted to do some key takeaways. Now would be a great time.
Who would like to go first?
We would like you to go, Steve, and then we can wrap it up with Carrie, I think, from consultant to practitioner.
Okay. Well, I've got a couple things, and I actually wrote them down because we've been working on this webinar. We've been trading phone calls and trading notes, and takeaways that I have had that I'd like to share. And I spent a lot more time on this in this material than our webinar guests have. But I'll share this. The key to delivering exceptional customer service, or CX, quality consistently over time by design, rather than inconsistently here and there by chance, is to incorporate technology that creates an emotional connection into the processes designed to create transactional efficiency. That's one. And then I thought, even further, the holy grail of technology aimed at improving customer service, or CX, quality is to identify and operationalize technology that reflects or serves as a surrogate for customer-focused employees' behaviors. So, for instance, being interested, being engaged, being motivated, being observant. And this is what we see in software that collects and archives guest preferences that were expressed during previous days and anticipates those during the current stay.
I love that. And that's a natural application of AI over time, to being able to look at what has happened and predict what will happen or should happen. So I love that as one of your key takeaways. That would be a nice place to start with AI considerations. So I'll toss it over to Carrie.
Yeah, I think that was well said. And I think of all the things we chatted about today, and of course have chatted about prior, I think that really, again, just trying to thread the technology with the mission and goals of the organization to make it the best guest experience, again, so that guest wants to come back and enjoy, all that you have to offer. And I think that's, at the end of the day, we're striving for that every day with what we choose and how we choose, and the flexibility that we do when we pick things, and again, making the change happen in the right way and for the right decisions. So
Perfect.
Well, this has been fantastic. Our webinar has been High Return Hospitality, Operational Excellence Meets Emotional Connection, brought to you by Agilicis. I just want to remind everyone who attended, this will soon become available streaming on demand, like later this afternoon. Please share the link. You may have colleagues who need to see it, who haven't seen it yet, and you may want to enjoy it all over again and take more detailed notes. Our guests have been Carrie Holmes from Kalahari Resorts and Conventions, Steve Curtin, best-selling author and keynote speaker, and Terry O'Hanlon from Agilicis. Thank you all so much.